Chapter 221, Disappointment. A surprised glint flashed from Mu Weiniang's eyes. She knew that this professor had a few precious ores he got from an ancient tomb many years ago. Those objects were regarded as his treasured collection. Thus, she was very curious. Tang Xiu was very young, why would he want to buy those few precious ores? All right, let's have dinner. Professor Hu himself didn't care whether Li Bai was willing to sell the ores or not. His purpose was simple: to clarify Tang Xiu's identity and meet his old friend while convenient. After they sat, Li Bai asked in a seemingly inadvertent manner, "Anyways, your name is Tang Xiu, isn't it? You two know that the values of the wintertide fluorite and the star fragment stone are extremely high. Might you tell me for what purpose you're buying them?" "To forge some tools," Tang Xiu said calmly. For a moment, Li Bai stared blankly. Following that, he laughed involuntarily. "Are you kidding me?" Then, he immediately continued, "For the wintertide fluorite I can believe that, since its structure is easy to melt and cut. But the star fragment stone has a degree of hardness that can be compared to diamond." "This joke's not funny at all." Tang Xiu didn't explain. "Others might be unable to forge tools from the star fragment stone, but he can easily melt it. Would ordinary people even be able to understand his refining technique, to begin with?" Professor Hu's curiosity was sparked once again. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Tang Xiu, you said you want to forge tools. Can you tell me about the forging methods? Also, what kind of object are you going to forge from it?" Tang Xiu said lightly, "It's just some small objects and not worth mentioning, to be honest. However, as for the forging method, you won't be able to understand it even if I say it." Professor Hu and Li Bai looked at each other and paused before they secretly shook their heads. Extremely arrogant. Tang Xiu was way too arrogant in their minds. What he said making them incensed. Even Mu Weiniang also felt that Tang Xiu was arrogant and couldn't help but have some contempt for him. Looking at Mu Weiniang, Professor Mu asked, "I heard that you just graduated from Beijing University and are preparing to take your master's degree at Shanghai Uni." "I did. I was majoring in law, but I don't like it. I love traveling as well as archaeology, so I'm preparing to follow teacher to the Shanghai University and take archaeology." "Archaeology?" Tang Xiu's brows raised as a surprised expression glinted from his eyes. He just finished his CET and filled his application form to enroll there. He also chose archaeology. The reason being, he mainly wanted to find precious ores, as it would be helpful for his cultivation. Professor Hu sighed, "Archaeology is indeed the gate to the greater knowledge. It's necessary for us to explore the traces of 5 millenniums of culture and civilization left behind in China, excavating the historical data that has yet to be recorded in intellectual literature. It has a great influence and will be very helpful for the future generation." This old Lu is a geology professor as well as the vice president of the Archaeologist Association. You really can learn a lot from him. Mu Weiniang gently nodded and replied, "Teacher is indeed very knowledgeable. He has taught me a lot of things and I also benefited greatly even though I learned from him for just a few days." Knock, knock. The box's door was knocked as the waiter entered and smiled, "Lady and sirs, our Lotus Blossom House is welcoming a VIP today. He has successfully passed the test in painting skills and is using his right according to our old custom. He wishes to come to this box and have a toast here."
Ah.
The Lotus Blossom House has been very lively in the last few days. In just 10 days, 4 to 5 people have succeeded in becoming VIPs through the painting test. "Who's the person who passed today?" Professor Hu spoke with astonishment. "Zhu Xiang," the waiter said with a smile. Professor Hu's brows pricked and said,
Ah.
"It turns out to be that arrogant prick. A rampant youth and someone who thinks he's unrivaled in the world. I was originally too lazy to see him. But since it's the custom of your Lotus Blossom House, then let him come." Lu Bai was surprised and asked, "Old who, you have such a bad evaluation of him? Who's that kid and what's his background?" Professor Hu shook his head as he sighed, he's indeed a genius in painting and calligraphy. But his family spoils him too much, turning him into a young man without a hint of modesty. People would only be able to see his arrogance and rudeness. You heard about the Shanghai Golden Duck exhibition 2 years ago, right? This kid reached the height in a single bound in that art exhibition, and numerous people know him ever since. Lu Bai suddenly said, "Oh, it turns out to be him. He's indeed a proud little chap. But I know nothing much about calligraphy and painting though. So it didn't catch my attention. I too have heard of him. He's notorious and has ruined a lot of girls' chastity." Mu Weinying said. "How come you know that?" Professor Hu was stunned. "At first, I also liked his paintings, I even collected one of his works. But I accidentally heard from a friend of mine that he's notorious for ruining the chastity of a lot of girls in Shanghai as well as dumping them afterward. One of whom was pregnant and then committed suicide by jumping from a 12-storied building, claiming 2 lives. Since his family has quite a few connections, the case was put down. However, since I wanted to find out whether the case was true or not, I asked my friend in Shanghai to investigate it, and it turns out that everything is true." What a bastard. Lu Bai's face changed as he loudly cursed. Tang Xiao had no interest in these matters. He silently ate his meal, thinking whether he should go back to Star City immediately after dinner or spend the night in Tianjin City and go back in the morning. He still had something to do as fast as possible to set up the winery. Even though he had taught the recipe and its process to Scarblade Chang, but he couldn't tell whether Scarblade Chang would be able to produce the delicious fermented wine after the rebuilding of the winery. And at the moment, along with the increasing need for resources, he would also need more money. If he didn't think of a way to speed up the speed in making money, he would definitely be unable to support his and Gu Yin's cultivation. Furthermore, he also had to take a trip to Jingmen Island in the near future to see Yen's condition. The longer he delayed, the more severe her injuries would be. He already asked everyone he knew of to help him find the chrono crystal as well as the demonic revival grass. Although there was only a minute possibility of finding them on Earth, he didn't want to give up even if the chances were very low. "Excuse me. I'm Bai Yu, the general manager of this Lotus Blossom House." The box's door was knocked as a middle-aged woman in a blazer approached the box along with a proud and arrogant-looking young man. Professor Hu stood up. He didn't like this youth, but he had no choice but to give a face to Bai Yu. After all, the Bai family had an aloof status in Tianjin City. Even though Bai Yu referred herself as the manager of the Lotus Blossom House, but regular patrons here knew that she was actually the owner of this place. "Congratulations, Manager Bai. Your restaurant has added a VIP yet again." Bai Yu smiled, "Thank you, Professor Hu. I haven't seen you for quite a while in our Lotus Blossom House. Could it be that our service here is too poor so it doesn't meet your elderly satisfaction?" Professor Hu waved his hand and said,
Nah.
"I was just very busy lately so I rarely had the chance to come by." Bai Yu nodded, Professor Hu and everyone. "I will introduce you a distinguished VIP of our Lotus Blossom House, Zhu Xian." Zhu Xian, this one is Professor Hu, he once served as a professor in the Department of History at Tianjin University. Zhu Xian went into the box. His eyes swept over at everyone before his sight finally landed on Mu Weinying. All of his attention was fully focused on her as even his expression froze. He didn't hear anything spoken by Bai Yu and Professor Hu. As a son of an influential family in Tianjin City and also having studied in Shanghai University for 4 years, he had seen numerous beautiful women already, but he could hardly find one of them to be compared to Mu Weinying. "Zhu Xiang," Bai Yu knitted her brows and called out again. This time, Zhu Xian finally was able to get back his composure. He looked at Bai Yu and immediately walked toward Mu Weinying. Trying to look as amicable and graceful as he could, he shoved a handshake and smiled. Hello, I'm Zhu Xiang. Might I ask this young lady's surname? At this moment, Professor Hu's face blackened as an awkward expression was written all over Bai Yu's face as she angrily glared at Zhu Xiang. Mu Weining didn't get up nor even looked at him. She sat still in her seat and quietly savored her dishes. Tang Xiu also didn't get up. He had no interest at all toward this Zhu Xiang or the Lotus Blossom House. The purpose of his visit here was to buy the Wintertide Fluorite and Star Fragment Stone from Lu Bai, even though it was a pity that it was a wasted trip. Therefore, he had decided that he would find a hotel to spend the night after the meal and return back to Star City tomorrow. Zhu Xian frowned. Looking at Mu Weining, who was ignoring him, despite being angry inside, he still pretended to not care about it as he still held his amiable smile. Miss, by virtue of my painting skill, I got the VIP membership of this Lotus Blossom House. Might I ask whether Miss knows about paintings? I also brought along my work with me, would you like to appreciate it? Mu Weining finally looked up slowly. She coldly looked at him as she shook her head and said, no. Unless it's the work of a famous expert, I won't see it. Furthermore, I offer you an advice. We, Chinese, have a traditional virtue, that is, respect for the elderly and care for the young. The manager of dining hall just introduced you to Professor Hu, but you blatantly ignored him. I really want to know whether you were educated or not. If not, I know a place that might make you educated and cultured. At the opposite of her, Tang Xiu looked up and thought that Mu Weining's line was quite interesting. A smile outline revealed itself on the corner of his mouth as he asked, where is it? Juvenile Correctional Center. Mu Weining glanced at Tang Xiu and lightly said. Tang Xiu looked at her with an odd expression. Inside, he was at a loss whether to cry or laugh. The words she spoke were truly venomous. The correctional institution was actually enough to express it, but she still added juvenile. This meant that in her eyes, Zhu Xian wasn't a grown-up. You. Anger finally filled Zhu Xiang's face. But he suppressed the flames of anger in an instant. He couldn't get the subtle meaning behind Mu Weining's line. But facing Mu Weining, who was really too beautiful, he only put the hatred inside and decided to teach her well after he successfully hooked her up. Zhu Xiang secretly heaved a breath. He turned around and looked at Professor Hu, saying,
Ah.
I didn't expect to see Professor Hu here. Have you been well? My grandfather previously said that you're in a poor health, so you should take care of yourself better. Professor Hu's face became darker. The meaning behind Zhu Xiang's words was as if he deliberately made his health deteriorate. He snorted coldly as he silently sat back in his seat. Lu Bai looked at his old friend's expression and secretly sighed inside. He turned toward Bai Yu and said, Manager Bai, right? I'd have to trouble you to help us send the visitor off. Chapter 222, Too conceited to differentiate good from bad. Bai Yu was also annoyed by Zhu Xian at this moment. But in the presence of other visitors, she couldn't flare up and could only suppress her anger inside her heart. She nodded and looked at Zhu Xian, since the guests don't welcome you. You can go now. Zhu Xiang frowned. He snorted coldly and said, Manager Bai, what's the meaning with this? I'm your Lotus Blossom House distinguished VIP. How can you dismiss me with such manner? Bai Yu had never thought that Zhu Xian was so conceited and unable to differentiate good from bad. Although she was fully angered, she still contained it and wanted him to leave first. However, this person turned to be unable to accept the good intentions of others, and in turn, even bit her. Under such blazing anger, Bai Yu didn't even care about him anymore as she said icily, Mr. Zhu. The others clearly said for the visitor to leave and you still want to stay here? Don't tell me you can't differentiate between good and bad. Do you want others to kick you out? Only then will you be content? Furthermore, even though you've become our Lotus Blossom House VIP, but you still have to behave yourself. If you want to make trouble in our Lotus Blossom house, then leave. I'll revoke your VIP status. Zhu Xiang flew into a rage. This kind of feeling of being berated and aimed at was not something his self-esteem could stand. His face flickered unceasingly. He gritted his teeth and said, "Manager Bai, words have been said and you have to stay true to your own words. I gave my painting to your Lotus Blossom house, and you actually want to drive me away? Do you want to destroy your own reputation? Also, I've looked at the paintings on the wall downstairs. Most of them are garbage. I endured having my painting being hung along with the other trash paintings in the same place. And you're still so dense despite my good intentions?" Despite her fury, Baiyu smiled as she stared at him and sternly said, "Very good. I really never thought that you'd turn out to be such a character. I'll hold to my words. But starting from today, if you dare step into my Lotus Blossom house even half a step, I will consider it as a provocation to us. I want to see what ability you or even your Zhu family have." Professor Hu and Mu Weining also looked angry at the moment. The paintings hung downstairs, some of them were also their work. And now Zhu Xiang called them garbage. This greatly annoyed them. "Pa!" Professor Hu slapped the table. He stood up and shouted, "What a rubbish talk. You are just a boy who hasn't fully grown your hair. You have a little ability, but your arrogance is truly boundless. If our paintings are garbage, then what rank are your paintings? A treasure? Humph. You just want knowledgeable people to make you a laughingstock. Professor Hu, you're a historian, you dare to compare yourself to me in painting and calligraphy? I do respect your trivial knowledge of history and literature. But please don't disgrace yourself in the painting field. And to be honest, your painting hung on the wall downstairs is indeed garbage. If you're unable to accept it, let's compare yours with mine and let all the guests of the Lotus Blossom House appraise and comment on them." Zhu Xiang sneered. Professor Hu was so enraged even his lips shivered. His raised arms also trembled slightly. He already knew that Zhu Xian was very rampant, domineering and uninhibited. But he had never imagined that he would be arrogant to this extent. Did he really have no respect whatsoever for the elderly? Mu Weining stood up and coldly looked at Zhu Xiang, using your strong point to attack the other's weak point, eh? You know, seeing this attitude of yours, I really beg to differ. Since you want to compare yourself, I'll accompany your play. Let's have a bet. Zhu Xiang was surprised for a moment before proudly replying, "Relying on you? It's not that I'm looking down on you or Professor Hu, but do you really think that you're better than me?" Suddenly, his eyes turned. An excellent idea sprouted inside his mind as a deceitful smile revealed itself on his mouth. He cleared his throat and said, "However, if you want to bet with me on Professor Hu's behalf, it's fine. But since it's a gamble, a stake must be put onto it. What kind of stake do you dare to bet in this gamble?" Mu Weining's brows slightly pressed. Zhu Xiang's meaningful glance disgusted her deeply. After a short moment of silence, she replied slowly, "I have a set of precious calligraphy created by Grandmaster Wang Shiji. If I lose, I'll give it to you. But if I win, what will you put out as a stake?" Zhu Xiang's brows wrinkled. He then sneered, "Humph, Wang Shiji's calligraphy can be said as a priceless treasure, but I don't think it's enough. If you lose, you have to comply with a condition, whatever it is. But if I lose, I will give you the sailboats and pavilions painting by the famous painter in the Tang dynasty, Li Xixuan, while I'll also agree with your condition." This? Mu Weining hesitated. She cared about the set of Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy, but losing it would only make her distressed for a few days. But, she was afraid that Zhu Xiang would ask an excessive condition she couldn't accept. Furthermore, she also realized that although Zhu Xiang's attitude was bad, his painting skill was very good. She knew that she wouldn't be able to win him convincingly. At the most, it would only be a tie. What should I do? Should I give up? If she was to give up, it wouldn't only show that she was timid and admitting that her ability is inferior to his. For a while, Mu Weining was as though riding a tiger and hard to get off. It was impossible for her to stop here. Tang Xiu, who was quietly savoring his dishes, finally put down the chopsticks in his hands. He shook his head and sighed, A3, I have seen too many fake and shameless bastards, but only a few can match your shamelessness, Zhu Xiang. I can tell that the condition you're going to propose is, in fact, to let her dig the pit and jump into it on her own, no? Actually, you don't need to admit it. I know perfectly well about your idea. It's nothing more than you want to use the condition as a constraint that after you win, you want her for you. Am I correct? In a split second, everyone's expression greatly changed. As blazing furious as he was, Zhu Xiang, who was seen through, suddenly hated Tang Xiu and at the same time, immediately shouted in a stern voice, it's you who's a shameless bastard. Don't you dare slander me. I admit I really like her, but in no way will I use that condition to force her. A graceful lady is there and a gentleman comes to court her, but still, he will respect her right to pursue her own choice. If I can get her heart, I'll marry her. Marry? Wasn't this also counted as having a hidden intention? Everyone present inside the box revealed a look of disgust, as Mu Weining had a terribly blackened face. Tang Xiu laughed involuntarily and said, I've seen shameless people, but never have I ever seen a truly shameless one such as you. Fine. How about I accompany you to play? If I lose, say whatever condition you want. But if you lose, I don't want whatever calligraphy or painting you have, just get your damn ass out of here. Flames of anger were almost blazing out from Zhu Xiang's eyes. He glared angrily at Tang Xiu and snapped, Who the fuck are you? Why the hell are you meddling in someone else's business? Tang Xiu pointed at Mu Weining and plainly said, You just said yourself that you're a gentleman who is trying to court a graceful lady. You can take me as her envoy or guardian. How about it? Didn't you dare to bet with her? And now, do you dare or not to play and bet with me? Zhu Xiang clenched his fists. If he didn't strongly restrain himself, he really would have fiercely punched Tang Xiu's face. Looking at Mu Weining's blackened face, he said, Fine. Since you want to insult yourself, I'll help you. But I don't like a gambling without stakes. I'll use my sailboats and pavilions, painting and you bet your collection. My collection? Tang Xiu rolled his eyes and turned toward Mu Weining. He then said lightly, Do you dare to lend me your treasured set of Wang Shiji's calligraphy? Mu Weining took a deep breath and spoke with a deep tone, I'll lend it to you. Tang Xiu shrugged his shoulders and said, Did you hear it? The set of Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy should be enough, no? Despite his fury, Zhu Xiang smiled as he clapped his hands and said, All right. Since you want to bet, then bet we will. Say. You want to do it here or in another place? Tang Xiu looked at Baiyu and peacefully asked, Manager Bai, right? Since your Lotus Blossom house has a painting custom, you should have prepared paintbrush and papers, right? May I trouble you to provide the painting tools as well as make an appraisal committee consisted of the guests of your restaurant? Baiyu looked at Tang Xiu deeply. She then nodded and said, I'll immediately pass the orders as per your request. The contest will be held half an hour later in the first floor's hall. All right. Tang Xiu replied calmly. Baiyu looked at Zhu Xiang with a bad expression, saying, Now, come with me. Zhu Xian snorted coldly and glanced provocatively at Tang Xiu as he then turned around to leave. Inside the box. The anger on Professor Hu's face slowly faded away and was replaced with a bitter expression. He looked at Tang Xiu, shook his head and sighed, Young man, you shouldn't have let your decisions be affected by your emotions. I know you did that out of good intentions. Yet, on-the-spot painting is not something you can fake. The set of Wang Shiji's treasured calligraphy might not reach the point of being priceless, yet it's still very valuable. It's a collection everyone who loves calligraphy and painting long for, even in their dreams. At the moment, the contempt Lu Bai had toward Tang Xiu got more intense. He believed that Tang Xiu was just jealous toward Zhu Xiang because of Mu Weiniang. He even thought that Tang Xiu was very stupid. He knew that Zhu Xian was very skillful in painting, but still, Tang Xiu gave his face to be slapped by him. The most annoying thing was that Mu Weiniang would also lose her precious set collection. Mu Weiniang was also a bit bitter and annoyed. Even though Tang Xiu did it to help her, but to think that she had to lose her calligraphy collection made her quite distressed. One must note that it was given by her grandfather, of whom he spent quite a big effort to find and buy it at a sky-high price. Tang Xiu, you really can paint? After hesitating for a moment, still, Mu Weiniang couldn't help asking. A little. Tang Xiu lightly replied. You know a little about it? Mu Weiniang couldn't feel more disappointed anymore. Professor Hu took his eyes back from Tang Xiu and said with a wry smile.
Ah.
How I wish Yang Qing was here. He's acclaimed as the most outstanding genius of the new generation in the painting and calligraphy world. His skill in painting is extremely high, and only a few of the great painters of the older generation are more skillful than him. Lu Bai nodded upon hearing this, saying, I also have heard about this Yang Qing name. He's indeed a very skillful young painter. He started to learn painting at the age of 5 and was able to paint good works at the age of 10. Between the age of 16 and 26, a mere 10 years, he won hundreds of awards. Professor Hu nodded and said, That's right. If there wasn't the sudden emergence of a certain painting recently, I originally believed that he could win the first place in the next Asian painting competition with his 100 Birds Turned Toward the Phoenix masterpiece. Huh? Lu Bai was surprised and asked, A sudden emergence? What painting is that? Accurately speaking, it's a grand and majestic large-scale architectural design, and was manually hand-painted by someone. Professor Hu exclaimed. Chapter 223, Contest. Lu Bai was astonished and Mu Weiniang was curious. On the contrary, Tang Xiu's face flickered upon hearing Professor Hu's story. Architectural design drawing? Was it his drawing? Old Hu, tell me the details. Why would this architectural design be eligible to win the prize in the Asian painting competition? Lu Bai inquired. Why can't it? Professor Hu asked back, and said seriously, You haven't seen the drawing, I presume. If you see it, you'll definitely have your jaw dropped. I have many famous and highly respected painter friends. They even admitted inferiority upon seeing it. The creator of that architectural design has a superb painting technique, it's very exquisite. That architectural design is a masterpiece, and looks like it imitates and gives off the majestic aura of the palatial heavenly palace. Suddenly, Professor Hu's eyes turned bright. He took out his mobile, opened a mail and its picture attachment. He handed it over to Lu Bai and said, I just remembered that my friend sent this architectural design to me. Unfortunately, it's just a picture and I can't see the original one. Lu Bai took the phone. After looking at it for a few seconds, his pupils suddenly contracted as disbelief burst from his eyes. Despite his trivial knowledge about paintings, he could see that the architectural design was unusual. The lines were boldly drawn with incisive technique, giving off a unique charm. The picture was simply the paradise. The thing that shocked him the most was not only this, but the design of the architectural buildings itself. The edifice drawn on it looked extremely palatial and majestic. The style was strange and uncanny, and it seemed like it reflected the incisiveness of the author. He dared say that once someone constructed the edifice in this architectural design masterpiece, it would definitely become the most famous landmark in China. Not only would it be famous throughout the country, it would also be well known worldwide. It's so amazing. This old man, I have seen a lot of paintings in my life, including many masterpieces of famous painters. But absolutely none of them can be compared to this painting. Mu Weining, who had yet to see the picture, had her curiosity greatly sparked by looking at the shocked expression on her teacher's face. She stood up gracefully and came over to Lu Bai's side. Her eyes fell on the picture on the mobile screen as her bent waist slightly trembled. This is... Mu Weining was shocked. She hardly believed her eyes. She couldn't believe that there would be someone in the world who was able to paint such a divine masterpiece. She had once seen the incomplete picture of the Along the River during the Qingming festival painting, and she dared guarantee that even a complete version of the painting couldn't be compared to this one. This painting should have existed only in heaven. Why would it appear in the human world? Lu Bai handed the mobile phone to Mu Weining. The shock on his old face hadn't yet faded away as he sighed.
Ah,
someone who can draw this painting can be called the god of painting. I really can't imagine now as to how huge the sensation would it create if the buildings in this painting are really built. Indeed. If the buildings on this painting were really built, I'll make sure to go to the residential area and buy a house there. Professor Hu said with a straight approving expression. Lu Bai said categorically, "You can count me in as well." Mu Weining took the mobile and went back to her seat. Her eyes full shock, she even didn't hear the conversation of the two old men. Her sensual lips slightly opened and muttered, "If the author of this painting is willing to accept apprentices, I'll definitely be the first one." Her voice wasn't loud. Yet, Professor Hu and Lu Bai, including Tang Xiu, could clearly hear it. Professor Hu and Lu Bai glanced at each other with a forced smile on their faces. They also had the same kind of impulse. Tang Xiu reached out his hand to Mu Weining and said, "Show me." Mu Weining came back to her senses and handed over the phone to Tang Xiu with a complex expression. Her eyes were blurred, and nobody knew what she was thinking. Tang Xiu took the phone and saw the picture on the screen. Then, a wisp of a smile revealed itself on his face. He didn't expect that the architectural design that was praised by Professor Hu, Lu Bai, and Mu Weining turned out to be the one he painted. Immediately after, he returned the phone to Professor Hu. Looking at Tang Xiu's manners, Professor Hu and Lu Bai secretly despised him. Thinking that Tang Xiu simply had no enthusiasm toward it. That made them even worried about the upcoming contest. Shortly after, a waiter of the Lotus Blossom House came to their box, inviting everyone to the painting exhibition hall downstairs. When the four came to the base floor, dozens of guests had surrounded the two tables in the middle of the hall. They could clearly hear their voices. "We're so lucky to be able to see the contest between two talented young painters today. Speaking of painting, I also have learned it in the past for a period of time. But it's a pity that I'm not talented, so I gave it up. Fortunately, I followed old Wang visiting this Lotus Blossom House today, so I can see the contest between the two evenly matched painters. I also have heard about Zhu Xiang's name. He's a quite famous, skilled young painter. But as for Tang Xiu, I've never heard of him. He should be a junior who remains low profile. Zhu Xiang is a very arrogant person. A moment ago, when he was introduced and had a toast in the box, his attitude is not friendly, nor does he have a shred of modesty in dealing with things. Such a person, even if he has excellent painting skills, perhaps won't have much charm in his works. But I'm really curious about the young man who's his opponent in this contest. Tianjin City is very big, and having a Zhu Xiang emerge here is kind of a given. Could anyone else be more skillful than him? But in any case, I think Zhu Xiang will surely win tonight. I think so too. Well, I look forward to seeing a good show, though. Tang Xiu secretly smiled as he heard these discussions. He indeed had no reputation in Tianjin City, let alone in the painting world. So it wasn't a wonder that everyone present was full of confidence in Zhu Xiang. However, if one couldn't handle the pressure, one shouldn't try to be in a position to deal with the problem. He was confident in his painting skill. Let alone Zhu Xiang, who was his opponent now, even if the other party was a master painter, he was not afraid at all. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin now. Upon seeing that Tang Xiu and the others had arrived, Baiyu announced, as everyone immediately came into the large platform in the hall. She then approached Tang Xiu and asked, "Are you confident?" "Rest assured." Tang Xiu could see Baiyu's mind as he replied with a nod. Baiyu nodded and said, "If you're confident, please do the best you can. I look forward to your performance. I won't let you down." Tang Xiu said. After having said that, he walked to the center of the hall. Looking at Zhu Xiang indifferently, he said, "Bring everything you got, so you won't say that I'm bullying you when you lose." Zhu Xiang sneered, "Relying on you? If you had decades of experience in this field, maybe you'd be qualified to say this. Let's cut the bullshit, actions speak louder than words. Let's see what you can showcase." Tang Xiu no longer paid attention to him as he looked at Baiyu and calmly asked, "Are there any requirements or rules for this contest?" Baiyu brought along 10 men and women among the onlookers. Only 2 of them were still young, whereas the rest were middle-aged or elderly. Baiyu pointed to the 10 people and said, "These 10 are our distinguished VIPs and have their paintings being exhibited in this hall. I can guarantee their fairness to be the appraisal committee for this contest. Furthermore, after they assessed your works, the other guests will also take a vote. As for the rule of this contest, it's very simple. Draw your paintings with a lotus-related landscape theme within half an hour. Your painting brush, paints, and painting papers have all been prepared." "All right." Tang Xiu nodded. Zhu Xiang said with unfazed expression, "It's also fine with me." Baiyu nodded and looked at her watch and then said, "It's 8:28 p.m. now, so the end time is at 8:58 p.m. I hereby announce that this contest is started. Now." Zhu Xiang showed Tang Xiu a ridiculing look. He quickly grabbed the painting brush on his table. After pondering, he started to slowly paint on the canvas. Tang Xiu was different. At the moment when Baiyu announced the start of the contest, he slowly closed his eyes, imagining the painting he was about to paint. After a few seconds passed, he quickly grabbed the painting brush, identifying all available paints, and then began drawing. His painting speed was a lot faster than Zhu Xian, and quickly, his brush moved as though a dragon serpent as each and every pattern began to take shape on the canvas.
Ah.
He must be lost. A touch of bitterness appeared on Mu Weining's mouth upon seeing Tang Xiu's painting speed. She was well aware of the main essence of painting. Unless one was a maestro, whoever dared use the dragon serpent technique and rapid painting movements, definitely wouldn't be able to draw a genuine masterpiece. There was a line in the painter's circle that the essence of carving and painting was to slowly carve out finely particulate lines, without being affected by appearance and shape. Mu Weining herself had never heard Tang Xiu's name before, so he should have no reputation in the calligraphy and painting world. He was but only a nameless youth. Even if he had some skills, he wasn't someone at Zhu Xiang's level. Professor Hoot secretly shook his head. While looking at Tang Xiu from afar, he smiled bitterly. "Mu Weining, you shouldn't have agreed before. Looking at his performance, it seems like you'll lose that Wang Shiji's calligraphy of yours." Mu Weining was a bit down. But she was still able to stomach it as she slowly replied, "If I have to lose it, then lose it I will. What is lost, no need to cry over spilled milk." Professor Hu lamented, "It seems you can remain positive in this situation. However, I feel that Tang Xiu himself is someone with an unusual identity. Even if you lose your treasured calligraphy, perhaps he has thought of something to compensate you." "What's his background?" Mu Weining was surprised. "I don't know." Professor Hu shook his head. "But have you seen an ordinary student who just finished his CET be able to pay 20 million for only a few stones? Yet he still wants to buy old Li's ores. His funds are definitely big, much more than 20 million yuan." Mu Weining replied in astonishment, "Did he buy the 2 Wintertide fluorites and the star fragment stone from you with a sky-high price?" Yes. Professor Hu nodded. Old Lu knows very well about the value of these 2 ores. The price I gave him is only the floor price, but this fellow accepted happily and didn't even haggle over it, directly transferring me the money. Also, there's an object wrapped with yellow cloth inside the travel bag he just handed me, of which, he just recently bought it. Speaking the truth, I can't tell his origin, neither can I see through him. Chapter 224, Inciting Awe. Lu Bai unenthusiastically said, anyone can act decent and solemn. Even if he has a bit of status and background, but perhaps he's just SOSO in painting. As spirited and vigorous as a young man could be, he's just intentional, wanting to show off by challenging a love rival in exchange for his love interest's attention. Just wait when he loses, only then will he know that he's just disgracing himself. You're really a pessimist, aren't you? Professor Hu chuckled. Sneering, Lu Bai said, why should I feel optimistic about him? What qualification does he have for me to feel optimistic about him? If he really can win against Zhu Xiang, I'll agree to sell him my Wintertide Fluorite and Star Fragment Stone. No. I'll give them to him for free. Professor Hu forced out a smile and said, Old Lu, you shouldn't let yourself be affected by your emotions in taking a decision. Lu Bai sneered, Old Hu, you know me. I always mean what I say. If he really wins against Zhu Xiang, I'll immediately return to Shanghai and take my 2 ores and give them to him. Upon seeing Tang Xiu's rapid painting appearance, Bai Yu and the 10 painting experts of the appraisal committee also shook their heads. They thought that Tang Xiu was only putting on an act, trying to look mysterious, but in fact, had neither truly learned nor was genuinely talented. The balance of victory in their mind was inclined toward Zhu Xian, including Bai Yu, who was very sick of him along with several other painting experts. Around a quarter of an hour later, Tang Xiu put his painting brush away and lightly drew 2 patterns on the landscape painting. He then pulled out a piece of white paper and tiled it on top of the painting scroll. I'm done. Tang Xiu looked around, his eyes finally landing on Bai Yu's face. The time isn't up yet. We'll wait for Zhu Xiang. Bai Yu nodded and said. All right. Tang Xiu replied and then stood in front of the table, waiting quietly. After nearly 30 minutes, Zhu Xiang finally painted the scenery he wanted to draw. He raised his hand to erase the sweat on his forehead, showing a contented smile on his handsome face. He then said with a clear voice, I've painted a good one. This painting can definitely be called as one of my best works. 2 of you, which one who will take the first chance to show your painting to everyone? Bai Yu nodded and asked. Zhu Xiang answered haughtily, I'll showcase my painting to these experts first. Wait until I show mine. I want to make him realize the truth, that looking at paintings is as much the same as eating food. After you eat the good one and then eat the poor one, you'll absolutely feel bored and feel that's not worth it. Mr. Tang, how about you? Bai Yu asked. Have it your way. Tang Xiu said indifferently. Bai Yu nodded and brought the 10 judges to the center. They stood in a circle around Zhu Xiang's drawing table and began to appraise his painting. The skill's basic foundation is solid. The lines are very clear, with distinct and clear textures. The green mountains and waterfalls are beautiful, with birds springing up and standing on the branches. The most distinguished and best part of all is the deep lake at the foot of the hill in which a beautiful lotus is in full bloom. Looking at this painting can suck people into a world of imagination of the landscape in this beautiful scenery. Yes. Take a look at the color gradation and assortment. It's delicate and exquisite, the tone is especially dazzling. The birds on the branches have their beaks opened, giving off the vibe of singing folk songs. I've seen a lot of paintings, and only a handful are better than this one. If I have to mark it with a number, I can give this one at least 80 points. It's elegant. This painting unexpectedly gives me a sense of elegance. It's really great. I'll give it 81 points. 80 points. Bai Yu's face showed a complex expression along with the judges' evaluations. Zhu Xiang's character might be very poor, but the foundation of his painting skill was truly solid. There were a lot of paintings in her lotus blossom house, but no more than 10 could be said as better than this painting. At this moment, she couldn't help but secretly feel worried for Tang Xiu. Bai Yu secretly sighed inside. She then looked at Zhu Xiang and said, "Take your painting and let everyone else to have a look. Wait until everyone has seen your work and the one done by Tang Xiu. Only then will we give you the assessment of the outcome of this contest." "All right." Zhu Xiang picked up his painting and slowly walked in front of the onlookers. It took a few minutes as he returned back to the table and put back his landscape painting on the table. He looked at Tang Xiu with ridicule and said, "No matter how bad your painting is, it has to be revealed, because any attempt to hide it will be futile in the end. I have showcased mine in front of everybody. Now is your turn. Of course, if you really feel that you have no chance to win, I'm willing to give you some face. If you directly admit that you lost to me, we won't see your painting." Tang Xiu shook his head and smiled. "Zhu Xiang, I'm really clueless as to where you got your confidence from. Have you learned the common principle of truth?" Zhu Xiang raised his brows and sneered, "What truth? The higher you stand, the harder you'll fall. You're clamoring in jubilation now. But in case that you lose, the shame you will face might even be beyond redemption." Zhu Xiang contemptuously replied, "Humph, wanting to defeat me relying on only you? Dream on. Cut the crap and take out your painting. Let everyone take a look at it." Tang Xiu paced backward. He turned toward Bai Yu and made an invitation gesture. Bai Yu came to the front of Tang Xiu's table and gently lifted the white paper that was covering the canvas. When her eyes fell on the painting, her eyes froze and her hand trembled. Her pupils suddenly contracted and shrunk as disbelief flashed from her eyes. This painting. At the moment, no one could understand her shock. Her eyes were glued to the canvas. Her heart jolted and throbbed faster than usual. The 10 judges, who saw her expression, each and every one of them revealed puzzled expressions. They approached the table. But when they saw the painting on the table, similar expressions as Bai Yu's immediately appeared on their faces. It was a deathly stillness. The whole scene turned extremely quiet that everyone present could hear if a needle fell on the floor at this moment. However, the 10 judges and Bai Yu were all trembling at this moment, with disbelief bursting out from their eyes. What happened? Finally, a middle-aged man asked aloud amid the waiting onlookers outside the platform. In a split second, the trembling bodies of the 10 judges and Bai Yu turned more intense, even though they also came up to their senses again after the daze. These 11 people, as though they had a tacit agreement between them, glared angrily at the man who just spoke a moment ago. That middle-aged man was bewildered. He raised his hand and scratched the back of his head. He was clueless as to how he offended the 10 judges and Bai Yu. Why would they look at him with such angry expressions? Bai Yu took a deep breath and looked at Tang Xiu with a complex expression. Then, she said, "It's truly unexpected. Never in my dreams have I ever imagined of being able to see such a landscape painting. I dare say that it's not a shock I've gotten from this, but a fright. I'm pretty much shivered down to the core because of your painting." One of the 10 judges, also with the same bitter expression, said, "I'm also frightened. I can't believe that anyone in this world would be able to draw such a landscape painting." Zhu Xiang was bewildered upon seeing the 10 judges and Bai Yu's reactions. He didn't even hear anything as to whether Tang Xiu's painting was good or bad in the end. After hesitating for a moment, he said aloud, "Manager Bai and 10 judges, is this kiddo's painting so appalling to look at? If so, loudly announce it and let him disgrace himself." "Shut up!" a judge angrily shouted. Zhu Xiang's face froze. A bad premonition spontaneously rose in his heart. Bai looked at Tang Xiu deeply and asked, Mr. Tang, can you let me showcase your painting to everyone? Please, and I'm sorry for the trouble. Tang Xiu answered with a nod. Bai nodded. She carefully picked the picture scroll of Tang Xiu's painting as she walked slowly step by step. Not only that, she slowly walked and stopped for every 2 steps for half a minute. It took her a full 7 to 8 minutes for her to finish showcasing it around. Everyone present turned extremely silent after they saw the landscape painting drawn by Tang Xiu. They even looked at Zhu Xiang with complex expressions on their faces. Professor Hu, Lu Bai, and Mu Weining, the first famed beauty in the capital, were also no exception. Eventually, Bai carefully put back the landscape painting on the table in front of Tang Xiu. After a moment of hesitation, she asked, Mr. Tang, might I ask if you're willing to sell this painting? Please open your price. As long as I can afford it, I won't haggle over it with you. Tang Xiu indifferently shook his head. He looked at Mu Weining and said, since she chose to trust me and willingly lent me Wang Shiji's authentic work for this contest's bet, I would like to give this painting to her and put a closure in this contest. Actually, it's very easy for me to draw this kind of painting. I can draw thousands of them if I want to. However, I'm very lazy and moody. So my paintings are very few and rare, not only for the time being but also in the future. Mu Weining was struck dumb. Why you want to give this painting to me? And no. This is too precious. Tang Xiu said with calm and tranquil expression, expressing the mood by the brush and playing with the inks to express it elegantly. This is what I understood in accordance with those scholars. That's why painting is just the spice of life. But don't let it become the main path in life, much less become obsessed with it. Otherwise, the rest of your life will be very plain and boring. Take it. Everything this Tang has given is not supposed to be taken back. A splendorous light flashed from Mu Weinings's eyes. Tang Xiu's remark caused an indescribably jolt inside her heart. After a few moments of silence, only then she nodded and slowly said, Thank you very much. Standing at the side, Zhu Xiang, that hadn't yet seen what kind of landscape painting was drawn by Tang Xiu, had a bad feeling at this moment, which was getting even more intense. He took a deep breath, looking at Tang Xiu and Mu Weining, who basically ignored him. Fuming with anger, he suddenly snapped, Who is the loser and the winner have yet to be decided? What the hell did you clamor for? I want to see what kind of trashing junk you have painted. Having said that, he strode to the table in front of Tang Xiu as his eyes landed on the painting he had drawn. Coldness struck down his heart the moment he saw the painting. The chill came not from the outside, but rather deep down from his innermost soul. It was a good painting. Perfecto. He had seen thousands of paintings, but he had never seen a better one. The towering mountain peak was as though a giant dragon, endless and spreading across, with a palatial palace on the summit. The magnificently decorated palace was shrouded in faint mists and clouds, with cranes dancing and white-feathered birds chirping and jumping ecstatically under the white clouds in the blue sky. A leaf boat drifted along the stormy surging river, whereas an elegant young man sat alone in its bow, quietly reading a book as he traversed downstream. Chapter 225, Heavy Blows. The end of the river was not connected to an endless ocean but ended at a clear, sparkling lake with a pavilion that gave off an elegant ancient charm. A barefooted girl splashed her foot on the lake water, drenching near a lotus. Suddenly, looking closer, Zhu Xiang found himself in the picture, in the celestial world. He no longer looked at the picture, as if he was seeing this world with his naked eyes. He was part of this place. He was summoned to this place. Such sensation was he was experiencing at this very moment. The onlookers at the first-floor hall of the Lotus Blossom House looked at Zhu Xiang in contempt. They had seen many shameless people, but never once had they seen someone as shameless as him. Of the two paintings, which was the better one and the most lacking one? Without needing a brain, even with their toes, they could see it clearly. Zhu Xiang's painting was good, but compared with Tang Xiu's, the difference was the contrast between day and night. There was no need to compare them. Hey, that surname Zhu surely has learned that there will always be someone better, huh? If I were you, I'd quickly take off my pants to cover my head, running from this place. So I can stop disgracing myself again. Mocks and jeers burst out from the crowd, immediately inciting laughter. Another one, also with a look of contempt, said in disdain, "Surnamed Shu, you've lost. So you must honor your promise and give the painting you promised. The result has been announced, you won't be such a bastard who will renege on a debt, will you? Right. Good or bad, you're the second young master of Shu family in Tianjin City. Don't be a sore loser who takes defeat with bad grace. You don't want to discredit your family, right?" Among the onlookers, Professor Hu's mouth severely twitched. Only at this moment did he recover from his shock. The expression in his eyes when he looked at Tang Xiu was completely different from before. He even began to rebuke himself for underestimating him. He was also a painter, but he had judged the book from its cover by looking down at Tang Xiu solely by his age. Today is the first time in my life that I committed such a mistake. Professor Hu couldn't help but force a smile and heave a deep sigh. Then, he began to feel sympathy for Lu Bai. Because he clearly remembered what Lu Bai said before. The wintertide fluorites and the star fragment stones. However, he knew very well that the number of ores Lu Bai had was more than him, they were worth twice his selling price. Lu Bai was taken aback. It was as if a pair of invisible hands grabbed his neck. He flushed red and couldn't even speak for a long period of time. He was as though a frog looking at the sky from the bottom of the well. So bitter and astringent, he wanted to vomit. Curiosity was written all over Mu Weiniang's face. Prior to this, Professor Hu had said that this young man's identity was mysterious, and now she believed that. Even before, she thought she could read through Tang Xiu, what a joke. But, she was excited. Because Tang Xiu clearly said that he rarely painted, which meant that this painting would definitely be priceless in the future. Zhu Xiang finally sobered up under everyone's ridicule. He looked around with a vacant expression as his face began to change, from red to white, white to green, green to purple, finally changing into a pale white as though a wax paper. He had lost. As reluctant as he was, but the fact was shown in front of him, and he had no choice but to admit it. Suddenly, Zhu Xiang looked at Tang Xiu with bloodshot eyes. With a stern tone, he shouted, "Who are you really?" Tang Xiu replied indifferently, "I'm just an ordinary person. A student who just attended the CET. You don't need to care about me. I'm neither famous in the painting industry nor do I want to be. Fame will only bring about trouble, there's no benefit gained from it." Zhu Xiang choked upon hearing his words and couldn't utter anything for quite a long while. He had thoroughly lost in the hands of a student who had just finished the CET. Only now did he realize that Tang Xiu's remark made sense. The higher one stood, the harder one would fall. He was too arrogant, too domineering, he thought that he was unequaled in the world. But at present, he had disgraced himself to such an extent that he ended up miserable. Bai Yu looked at him and sneered, "If my memory doesn't fail me, prior to this you've said that you'd give Mr. Tang the authentic work of the famous painter, Li Sixuan's Sailboats and Pavilions painting. Since you're a local, I suppose it won't take long to take it from your home and bring it here, yes?" Zhu Xiang stared at her with eyes blazing. Then he looked at Tang Xiu with hatred, saying, "Willing to bet means that I dare to lose. I'll go bring the painting now." Having said that, under numerous contemptuous eyes, he ran out of the Lotus Blossom House with an ashamed face. At this time, a middle-aged man in the crowd shouted loudly, "Say, today that surnamed Shu has lost so miserably, do you think he still has the face to come back? I dare say he will only send someone to deliver the painting." A burst of laughter immediately followed from the crowd. Bai Yu was in a very good mood now. Not only had she vented the foul mood inside her heart of having Zhu Xiang kicked out, moreover, she even saw such a peerless unique painting. Once this painting was known to the outside world in the future, the reputation of her Lotus Blossom House would also rise. She could already see the magnificent scene that would happen in this Lotus Blossom House in the future. Mr. Tang, thank you for giving me the chance to see such a good painting. Your bill today is on me. Furthermore, from now on, I guarantee that all your expenses also will be free. Bai Yu said earnestly. Tang Xiu was silent for a moment. He then nodded slowly. In that case, I'll write a few words for you. Please do appreciate it well. When ones give me a peach, I give him a plum. And since Bai Yu treated him well, Tang Xiu felt that he also should give something in exchange. He didn't want to give a painting but rather wanted to write a few words of calligraphy in return. Bai Yu was startled. In ecstasy, she repeatedly thanked. Great, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Tang. Tang Xiu waved his hand and, under the watchful eyes of the onlookers, he picked up the brush and wrote scroll, writing 6 words in a bold and cursive style. Elegance paintings of Lotus Blossom House. The characters were written in a vigorous and powerful style, giving off the vibe and charm of the elegance of an emperor and the joy of life. The elegance itself brought about the charm of the imperial aura. Decisive and hard, along with the nuance of chivalry and tenderness. What good characters! An old man who was not only an excellent painter but also a calligrapher, widened his eyes and shouted loudly. The moment Bai Yu saw the calligraphy, she immediately loved it. Having drowned herself in paintings and calligraphies for so many years, she naturally could distinguish the quality of the works. Although she couldn't be said to be an expert, she could see that these 6 characters were truly written superbly. 1 me, no. 5 million. I'll buy this calligraphy for 5 million. The old man who spoke just now blinked at Bai Yu, full of expectation. Bai Yu's heart jolted and hurriedly shook her head, saying, not selling. Let alone 5 million, even if it's 50 million, I won't sell it. Disappointment was written on the old man's face. He turned and looked at Tang Xiu. With a look of expectation, he said, little brother, might I ask, can you also write me a few characters? I'll buy it from you. Are you sure? Feeling odd, Tang Xiu asked. The old man nodded seriously, I'm sure. Tang Xiu looked around and loudly said, who else wants me to write some characters? 5 million each. And I'll only write 4 pieces. I'll buy 1. Mu Weining took a step and said without hesitation. Astonished, Tang Xiu glanced at her. He then nodded and said, anyone else? Professor Hu squinted his eyes and smiled, coming across such a good thing today, I'll also buy 1. At this moment, a middle-aged woman stood up and shouted, I'll also buy 1. Tang Xiu immediately said, all right. The 4 drawings have been sold out. After this, no matter who they are, I won't write anymore. Having said that, he immediately wrote 6 characters on each scroll. Soon, he had finished writing on the 4 scrolls. Tang Xiu then looked at the 4 people and directly told them his bank account. The money came by itself. Tang Xiu nodded contently and suddenly had an impulse. What if he wrote and painted hundreds of calligraphies and paintings on his free time and sold them? If all of them were sold out, he would become a rich man in an instant. But that was just a passing idea. Since he also understood the profound truth that when one thing was rare, it would become very precious. If he were to draw hundreds of calligraphies, perhaps his works would become too common. Bai Yu looked at him as she said with a smile, Mr. Tang, do you want to return to your box? I've sent someone to clean up the dishes and sent tea and dessert there. Please wait there until Zhu Xiang sends the sailboats and pavilion painting to you. Tang Xiu turned around to look at Professor Hu, whereas the latter said with a smile, let's go back and have a chat. Lu Bai was somewhat quite depressed at the moment. Upon seeing Professor Hu nodding at him, He originally wanted to tell Tang Xiu that he would give him his wintertide fluorites and star fragment stones. However, since they had to go back to their box, he decided to say it later. Right at this moment, two women came walking through the Lotus Blossom House's front entrance. Dressed in the latest stylish fashion with famous brand bags, they still gave off a graceful charm despite being in their mid-30s. Suddenly, one of the women's smile elapsed, replaced by a surprised expression. Tang Xiu? It was someone that Huang Jia couldn't forget. After a short moment of hesitation, she exclaimed aloud. Upon hearing that someone suddenly called him, Tang Xiu, who was about to walk upstairs with the others, was astonished. He turned around and saw Huang Ji. His mouth couldn't help twitching a few times. If not taking courtesy into account, he really wanted to leave this place immediately. As astonished as she was, Wang Jia was also quite pleasantly surprised. She took her companion and strode quickly toward Tang Xiu, saying excitedly, "Tang Xiu, is it really you? Great. I originally intended to go to Star City to look for you." Forcing out a smile, Tang Xiu said, "Please never say that you're looking me, would you? What I'm most afraid of is being misunderstood by people due to that." Exposing a lamenting expression, Wang Jia smiled. "You're the second man who made this Huang Jia keep thinking on him aside from my husband. Anyways, I personally don't think that this is a coincidence. The thing is, I think you really don't know what you want."